We're going to start off tonight with a 3-hour lecture on soil. I want to take us back to the Etruscans. No, not so I think I know most of you, but my name is Brian Friedman. I lived in Old City for years. We now live in Haverford, but I write about wine and spirits and travel for a living. I have a piece every week online for Food and Wine magazine. I write for Forbes, Whiskey Advocate. My first book came out in October on how climate change is affecting how we drink. It might be a thing, so there's that. But tonight we're going to be focusing on the wines of Sannio. And this is, let me introduce a friend of mine first. So this is Valentino.
Hi guys.
So Valentino, well, introduce yourself. What do you do?
I work for the Italian Ministry of Agriculture, and we manage European fundings aimed at the promotion of Italian companies abroad. So in the United States, especially in Canada, in Japan, China, everywhere. So we manage this promotional campaign. We run these promotional events. First of all, thanks for coming. We are very happy to have you as our guest in Philadelphia. It's our first time in Philly. I hope it will not be the last time, actually. So we will see at the end of the night, Brian. If they throw the glasses at us, we will not be back. But hopefully, they will enjoy the day.
So I've known Valentino for 10, 15 years. We've rented his family's beach house in Puglia. So we go way back, and he's one of the most passionate Philadelphia Eagles fans I know. Literally, like we're texting on Sundays. So I told him I was going to tell all you guys that he's a Giants fan or a Cowboys fan. You can't leave road things out. And then we have Annibale,
yes.
And Giampiero.
So Annibale and Giampiero are representatives of Sannio Consorzio, and they have obviously the work for their own wineries, because Sannio regroups more than 100 wineries. So Annibale represents the consortium, and La Guardiense, which is the biggest wine cellar in Sannio, and Giampiero represents Cantinetora, which is the small medium-sized company in Sannio. So if Annibale wants to say something, se vuoi introdurre, but they were very proud and they were...
Mentre i romani leggono e ci hanno sconfitto.
And obviously in the end the Romans won against the Sarmats.
Ma ci hanno attaccato soprattutto perché le nostre terre erano fertili.
Yeah, but the Romans attacked and conquered Sannio, especially because the land was so fertile.
E già voglio dire che anche che Pompei era una città sannita,
was a Samnite city,
e già a quell'epoca si coltivavano i nostri vini che presso i romani erano molto buoni.
And back in that time they already started to produce the wines we are tasting, more or less, not exactly the same wines, but
Slightly different.
yes.
Proprio la falanghina, che allora si chiamava Falerno.
The Falanghina back in time was called Falerno.
E poi anche l'Aglianico, che era un vitigno greco,
which comes from
e quindi
Greek
ellenico,
Ellenico, the original name Aglianico. That's the transformation of it. We can have more.
Great. That is the main one of the region, right? It's called Falanghina. Okay. What's interesting here about these two grapes, or these two sparkling wines, they're both made out of the same grape. They're both 100% Falanghina. What's fascinating here is the way they're made. The one on your left, the one for spot number 1, that's made using the Charmat method. Okay. This is that same process that Prosecco is made with, right? So pick the grapes, we're simplifying. Pick the grapes, crush them, ferment the juice, you have wine without bubbles, right? You gotta get the bubbles in it somehow. So we're not gonna talk about a method called forced carbonation, because that's basically like a giant soda stream machine for your wine. So we're not talking about that. This is a nice group of people tonight. The two other main methods. The first one is made by Charmat. So it goes into a giant stainless steel tank. And introduced into that tank is additional yeast and additional sugar, unfermented grape juice. It starts re-fermenting. The CO2 has nowhere to go. It's a natural byproduct of fermentation. It dissolves back into the liquid. You have your bubbles. The second one is made much more similarly to champagne, in that the second fermentation to get the bubbles in there is happening in the bottle that Bill was pouring from. The difference is after this wine went through its second fermentation, that yeast essentially died and then fell to the bottom of the bottle, and it sat there for 30 months. So the second one is going to have a savoriness and almost like that fresh-baked brioche, biscuity pastry death that's a direct consequence of the wine sitting on that spent yeast. This is what I love about Sannio, is that the range of wines and wine styles, even within the same grape variety, is remarkable. Get to the Falanginas. Does anybody have any questions or comments about the bubbles? Any insights you want to offer? Any burning questions? Any thoughts about them?
What's
Nick?
the maturation on the second? Because it was a lot darker than the first.
Yeah, so 30 months plus on the lees.
Yeah.
In terms of how long it was in the bottle, that's a great question. I don't think there was a disgorgement date on the back of that. I can find out for you. It was definitely darker. I'm wondering if some of that was a result of, little oxidation as it was sitting there with the lees. That's my guess. Yeah.
It pairs well with seafood.
Yes, right? Right. Well, which one did you prefer it with?
The octopus for the second one.
So good, right? And also, I thought the first one with the salmon.
Agreed.
Yes,
The light cheese.
totally.
I feel like that was very cheesy.
Yeah. And this is one of those wines that I think is a nice sort of alternative from Sunday brunch. Like we do lox and bagel every Sunday, and the knee jerk is always prosecco, cava. Yeah, something like this. I think inherently you get that elevated acidity naturally in the Falangina grape. So this is going to be, I think, a great alternative for something like that. The Sfelato. This one spent 4 to 6 months on the lees, right? So they let that spent yeast sink to the bottom, and then usually some poor winery intern is stirring it up because it's just not a good job that you want. But they're building texture into this wine, okay? Whereas the second one, we're not having that done to it. So again, two very different expressions of this grape variety. I will say, Falangina has been on a little bit of a tear in recent years. 90% of the world's Falangina is produced in Sannio. So what's kind of interesting is the range of different expressions depending upon which subzone it's being grown in, how it's being vinified. So again, these are two wines that are pretty unique. I'm wondering if we could talk a little bit to you guys, just briefly, while we're waiting for the food to come out. So let's talk a little bit about, with Sannio Falangina, the styles that are being made. Right? Are you seeing more wines like these? Are producers experimenting with aging the wine in oak? What's happening right now with this grape?
Allora, the evolution from the Farina, this is only still tanks.
Only still tanks.
Only
It never is
tanks.
aged in oak.
The very top selection from the grape Farina, small production in the barrel.
Like 10-15%, 10-15%.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So this is something that we see around the world. Is with the great white wines of a region, a lot of times the top selections, the grapes that are harvested from the best vineyards, the best parcels, they're aging them, they're vinifying them, very small percentage in oak barrels. But it's only those grapes whose wine can stand up to it, right? Because the last thing you want is to have a wine that doesn't have the concentration and the expressiveness to age in oak, and then it's just like licking a popsicle stick, right? So these are both in steel.
But Piero was saying that the main difference between the expression of Falanghina is given by the age of the production.
Okay.
Age.
So how? So the
The age where Falanghina is produced can be different depending on the
okay. So yeah, depending on the altitude, the height of where it's being grown, this, you know, and this is actually something that's beneficial for Sannio, is as there's more of a focus on slightly higher elevations, right, for growing your grapes. This is, you get cooler nights, you get more freshness. It's also a nice hedge against the warmer climate temperatures from climate change. We're now moving on to rosé. We have two reds. Interestingly enough, the rosé is made out of the same grape as the two reds. So this is an interesting way to get into the world of Aglianico, which, as the gentlemen were saying beforehand, the name, and I love this about grape names and wine names. I don't know if you caught it, but the grape name Aglianico comes from the word Hellenico, so Hellenic Greek. So this was like brought in by the Greeks. This was, you know, this is the wine. There's other, you know, with a lot of Italian wines, you can trace their origins back to the Greeks, the Etruscans, and oftentimes the names will clue you in to those geographic origins. This rosé is made by this gentleman. So if you can, so first of all, everybody, I would like when you take your first sip, just so that you know you feel justified in flying in. If everyone could be like, ooh, best rosé I've ever had in my life. It's a really good rosé. So tell us about it. I shouldn't be talking about your rosé.
Guys, you can turn the page because there are the other 4 wines on the
Yeah, if you flip over your tasting mat, if you would like, the other 4 wines are on there. In fact, even if you don't look at it, please do it for my emotional sanity, because that took about an hour and a half this morning at FedEx Kinko's in Wynwood to get that happening. So please flip it over so I feel good about my life decisions. All right, your wine.
The wine is the total grape of Aglianico.
100% Aglianico.
This is the fresh wine, aromatic and more the soft organoleptic sensation.
But I'm going to stop you there. Did everyone hear that word he used, organoleptic sensation? This is one of those wine words that those of us in the beverage industry tend to use. Mark is doing the seal clap there, so that's how you know it's good. So organoleptic is like, what are you smelling? What are you tasting? If you're ever at a restaurant and like the sommelier is getting all judgy on you, I find that just dropping that word really works. And just be like, well, the appearance is fine, but the organoleptics leave a lot to be desired. And be like, oh shit. Go on.
And even being a rosé, it doesn't lose its structure, its body.
Struttura e la persistenza.
The consistency typical of Aglianico. Please enjoy.
Sannio, is it, how is it made? How many hours? That's just the color that's extracted from the skins and pressed.
Viene estratto solo dalla
This is really interesting, and we were talking. I was telling Ernest over here that you know, red Aglianico tends to be very tannic, very powerful, concentrated. And what's interesting here with the winemaking is usually to get a color like this, the winemaker will have to allow the juice and the skin to macerate with one another for 6 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours, whatever it might be. That's not unusual with rosé from Provence, for example. Aglianico has so much color in those skins and tannin in those skins that this wine gets they don't let the juice in the skin soak at all. He presses the grapes, immediately runs off the juice and starts fermenting it, and just from the act of pressing the grapes, this color is extracted from those skins. That normally takes 8 to 10 or 12 hours to happen. So this is like the warning shot for the structure that's about to come with those reds after this. But that's pretty amazing.
So it's all free run?
It's all free run.
Wow.
Yeah. What I would recommend doing, because the food is coming out, when I sent the wine list to Bill, and I've spoken to Bill more in the last 2 weeks than I have with my wife, you know, as soon as he saw that there were 2 Aglianicos, he knew that we'd be doing this Brajol. No question. And that's because whenever you have a highly tannic, highly concentrated and powerful red wine like this, you need that fat and protein to counterbalance it. So what I would love you to do is try both of these on their own first, before you have that softening effect. But I'd love you to just pay attention to the fact that so often we talk about regions and appellations as if they're monoliths, right? Like every cab from Napa must be the same because it's all Napa, but that's crazy. There's like different hillsides, just like in Sannio, where there are, you know, it's one place, but there are so many different pockets and microclimates. And you know, if a 250 million years ago a glacier made a right instead of a left, or a whale died in the, you know, the prehistoric ocean and the carcass fell here, you're going to have more calcium in the soil than here. And that's going to change the character of the wine. These are 2 very different wines. I don't want to talk while your food is still hot. We'll come back to this, but please just enjoy the side-by-side. It's a pretty extraordinary comparison. So there you go. See, I had to bring in reinforcements. Now you listen to Toby, but not me. Thank you.
Go ahead, Brian.
So this is the last time I'm going to be interrupting you. I will before I start here. Please make sure before you leave that you sign this, because this is important for the region with, you know, with the funding from the EU.
Okay.
So your name is here. It doesn't have to be legible. Sign it. Don't make me forge later on. So I'm going to put this right here.
Brian, just pass it around.
You know what? I'm going to do that. Here we go. Everyone, I got a pen.
Good idea, sir.
All right. Also, 3 things before we talk about the late harvest. A couple of things that I want to just point out. That rosato, that rosé, which was sort of, people reacted very positively to it, even though dove Jean-Pierre. Okay, it's gonna find. So that rosato, like you all know, like in Italy, there's that quality pyramid, right, where you have, you know, IGP, which is sort of like, you know, from wine from a particular area, but it's not like towards the top of the pyramid, right? It can be great, but it's not the most prestigious classification. Then we have you know, DOC, right? Denominazione d'origine controllata. So it's the controlled naming of the place.
Eccolo qua.
Hey, buongiorno. Ti chiamo Brian. At the very top of the pyramid, reserved for the regions and the wines that are really exemplify that place in a visceral way. You have DOCG, right, which is Denominazione Denominazione d'origine controllate garantita, so the guaranteed controlled naming of the place. This is reserved for wines like Chianti Classico, like Barolo, right? Like Brunello di Montalcino. The first rosé in Italy to get that, to achieve that level, was Aglianico Rosato, right? And that's kind of crazy. Like for a rosé to get that level says something about the quality level of it and the expressiveness and make it how unique it is in that place. Also wanted to point out that there is, it is under consideration by the Italian authorities for Falanghina from Sannio to, we said probably in the next 5 to 7 years, to achieve that DOCG status, right? And this is, again, indicative of how exciting Italian white wines are. You know, the focus historically has always been on the reds, right? But the white wines of Italy are some of the most food-friendly, terroir-specific wines in the world, and they're finally getting that recognition. And when Falanghina from Sannio achieves that DOCG, that's going to be sort of the feather in the cap. Also wanted to point out, last thing before we talk about the late harvest, is that the Consorzio, they don't just work to promote the wines and to share them with people like you all, but they also work to guarantee the quality of it. Because there's no sense in promoting a place if the quality of the wines falls off. So it's this idea that it's maintaining the high level of quality and constantly seeking to increase it while growing the notoriety of these wines and of this really unique place in Italy. This wine in your glass, the last one of the night, before we start with dinner, we're now done the hors d'oeuvre part of the evening. This is the late harvest Falanghina, okay? So to give you an idea, most of the time, la vendemmia in Sannio è settembre, Augusto.
Yes. Last September, because it was September.
Last week of September, making first week of October.
So the harvest for most wine in Sannio is happening end of September, very early in October. The grapes for the wine that Bill just poured for you, this late harvest, they were not harvested until November of that year. So you're totally changing the ratio of liquid to sugar in those berries. This is how we get the sweetness here. They're adding no sugar, they're not manipulating. This is just the natural shifted balance of liquid and sugar that results in this wine. We were not going to have a dessert tonight, but then when Bill saw, again, this is my repetition time. When Bill saw this wine, he said, "Oh, we got to do like the lemon curd cheesecake." I said, "Well, he's like, no, we're doing it." And what I love about wines like this is that they are great with sweeter things as well, but they also do well with savory dishes, right? Just like you can have sauterne and foie gras. A late harvest Falanghina with a savory snack, right? I tend to find it does very well with things like fennel seed, white licorice. It's a really versatile wine that doesn't necessitate sweetness alongside it. It can also go serve as a counterpoint to salinity, right? So before we finish, would you like to add anything, or you?
Fermentation in the barrique.
Yes.
Fermentation in the 20 days.
Okay. In barrique or in seal?
In barrique.
Okay.
Finish fermentation, permanence in the barrique for the 3 months.
Okay. So, what's fascinating about this, do you notice when you taste this, it's not a sugar bomb? Right? Like so often when you see late harvest or some wine for dessert, like for me oftentimes it strikes fear into what little heart I have left. It's mostly a raisin. What I love about this is that it's not just a delivery system for sweetness. And because this was fermented and finished in oak, do you notice on the finish There's something that's slightly toasty, that has some of that, like that brown baking spice that sort of anchors that sweetness. To me, this is really smart winemaking. It's building texture, it's creamy, it's rich, so it doesn't come off as just sugar.
This is the long persistence, strong elegance for the structural
Yeah, structure. Yeah.
And this is white wine, very similar on the Pasito.
Yeah, like Pasito.
Pasito.
Pasito, yeah. So this is this I would call this, I don't know how to say this in Italian, but I would say this is a white wine that almost has the structure of certain reds, right? Because you get some of those oak tannins, you get some of that dryness alongside of the generous fruit, and that's quality of fruit from where the grapes are grown and really smart winemaking.
Yes. Typically sensation aromatic. This is peach.
Yeah.
Peach. Pescamatura.
Yeah.
Fruit. Yellow. Yes, albicocca.
Yeah. Yeah, apricots, peaches, nectarines, stone fruit.
Flowers, typical aromatic.
Garriga?
Garofano. Chiodi di garofano. Fiori bianchi.
Fiori bianchi,
White
okay.
flowers.
Yeah.
And this is very finally aromatic. Miele. Honey.
Miele, yeah. Yeah.
Non miele, note caramellate.
Yeah. Miele cotto.
Yes.
Yeah. So like cooked honey.
So Brian, are they picking this, I mean, what's the breadth in the vineyard? Like, is this 26, 25?
So how much, quanto zucchero vendete?
Residuo.
No. Brix.
Raccolta.
Yeah.
Siamo in
25, so 25.
Yeah.
So not crazy.
Right.
This is
Is this select berry or is this whole cluster?
So is it individual berries, or is it the whole cluster?
No, selection in the top grapes. La selezione dei migliori
Nella tavolo.
The best grapes.
Okay. Yeah. So they're selecting the best individual berries from the vines, right? Which is like laborious to the extreme.
Crazy,
Yeah.
Crazy.
Brian, how about skin contact?
Is there skin contact?
Yes. Circa one night.
So one night of skin contact,
Small
we're getting
contact.
some of that. Yeah.
Small contact. One night. Morning in the barrique.
Okay. Right. So it spends overnight soaking with the skins, and then the next morning it goes right into the barrel for the fermentation and for the wine making to start. Right. And again, that's another way of building savoriness into this as a counterpoint to the sweetness. It's really smart how this is made. I think a lot of times it's easy to get lazy with late harvest stuff and just rely on the sugar to cover up a multitude of sins. But they're not doing that here.